getting this live right here. Awesome. All right. Hello everyone. I got multiple things going on right now. I want to make sure that I have everything set up correctly. Awesome. Here we go. All right. So today I'm going to do a live stream about basically the five main things that I've found working with agency owners that are around the six-figure level. And ultimately, there are five main obstacles that are holding them back from achieving a seven-figure agency. And it's something that continues to come up as I continue to work with these six-figure agencies, both on a one-on-one basis, in our mastermind, through the interviews that I have with them every single day with the agency leverage episodes. And ultimately, it's five main things that you can actually become more aware of. A lot of times, it's things that we think our problems are actually just like symptoms of the actual real problem. And what you're going to find today, and what my goal is for this training today, is ultimately just to give you an understanding and more clarity on a path in order for you to get to where you need to be. Not only based around just like revenue growth, but ultimately how you can achieve what you want out of the business. A lot of times when we are start off on a business journey, we have this great vision of what we want to accomplish, and we get started, and ultimately there are either distractions or things that kind of throw us off track, and a lot of times it's based around these five main things, which I'm going to talk about. So I have very rough notes. Cool thing is I'm not doing like a script, which actually feels really good to just go live as opposed to hiding behind a teleprompter or anything like that. So if you guys have not met me before, my name is Jesse P. Gilmore. I am the founder of Niche in Control. You can check us out at nicheincontrol.com. And I've created this process and this method called leverage for growth, where basically we're leveraging the best parts of you as a business owner, and ultimately the organization's best practices for ultimate growth and expansion. And through this process, what I've realized is that and there are five kind of main things that hold people back, but I found that in my own journey. So before I get into those five things, let me tell you a little bit about my story, because I'm not an agency owner. Ultimately, I am a business consultant slash coach that's created this program, but I wasn't always like this. About 15 or so years ago, me and my brother Jeremy, we started a company called the North Coast Collective, and we fell in love with our idea. We were about 2 or 3 years ahead of our time with what we were doing, and so we were kind of pioneers of the space. And what we found is that it took us a long time to get a proof of concept out. It actually took about 2.5 to 3 years of getting this concept out. And by the time that we started to get some business success, what ended up happening is that as we became more successful or more popular and things like that, we ended up basically working more hours, and we couldn't really figure out how to get out of this kind of rat maze that we had created for ourselves, and it ultimately led towards burnout. At the end of about 5 years or so with North Coast Collective, it was becoming more successful, but inside we were dying. And it was because we just couldn't figure out how to make the business sustain and grow without our direct involvement. So this kind of led me on a journey of discovery, and I didn't really exactly know what I was searching for, other than finding entrepreneurship and kind of like this life and business by design that I was after. And so I went into two more businesses that I started, a photography business and also a nonprofit. And each of these had the same problems that I had in my first business, where if I didn't work, work didn't get done. Right. And so I ended up dissolving these businesses, and me and my now wife, we moved to Oregon and kind of to start over, start a whole new journey. And this is where we started working in corporate America. And I started to work under the VP of HR in a $4 billion global corporation, implementing business systems to remove what's called a single point of failure. If you're unfamiliar with that term, single point of failure is basically where if a person is absent from a business, it's where and the business is no longer able to sustain and grow without that person. And a lot of times, this is what's happening in a six-figure agency. Ultimately, if a person is gone, usually the founder, right, then either business doesn't get done or doesn't get done right the first time. And so that kind of led me on a journey, kind of like uncovering what I was actually searching for, which is ultimately the solution to my previous problems. And so I started Niche and Control back in 2019. Started working with, originally with SaaS clients or SaaS company clients, and that led towards the work with agency owners. And when I started to work with agency owners and applying this framework, this understanding of what I had learned in both corporate America and in entrepreneurship, it led towards what's now known as Leverage for Growth. And Leverage for Growth basically has an understanding of these five main things, which I'm going to get to right now, which are basically holding six-figure agency owners back. So now that you understand kind of a little bit about the history and kind of what led towards this talk. Now in Niche and Control, we've worked with over 40 different agency owners one-on-one. We've also worked with agency owners in our mastermind, and then if you've been following me for a while, you understand that we've also released Leverage for Growth agency leverage episodes on podcasts like Apple and Spotify. And in these interviews, I'm just kind of reevaluating Leverage for Growth, and I'm realizing that everything that we do is actually still relevant, still solving issues. So here it is. Number one is based around not having control of time. So the problem is that when you're an agency owner that doesn't have the control of time, ultimately what's happening is that as a business grows, you are working more longer hours, which keeps you working in the business rather than working on the business. And that problem, that issue with that is that you get too close to the trees in order for you to you're not really seeing the forest. And not having control of your time is really a tough thing. I always call it the monster. You created a monster in your business because as you take on more clients, it increases your hours, and you have to be able to figure out how to get out of that, because the pain that's felt can be kind of illustrated with one of my previous clients, Mike. When I first started working with him, I asked him, why did you start the agency? What was kind of like your main vision? He's like, I wanted to be closer to my kids and my family. I wanted to be there with them. And I was like, how many hours a week are you working right now? And he's like, 12 to 14 a day. And I was like, oh, you have the weekends free? No. So what this did was it created a lot of pain. There was like a not understanding of, like, there was kind of like this love-hate relationship with the business, because you want the business to succeed, but you also don't want to work as much as he was, and he was getting burnt out. And so what we did was we worked through a process of carving out 8 to 10 hours per week to work on the business. In about 6 weeks or so, we brought his 12 to 14-hour days down to 8 hours. And in that period of time, he was able to experience a lot more control over his business. He was able to kind of see where it needs to go. And so when he regained control of his time, he ultimately was able to quadruple his business and start bringing on help for him while working less. I talked with him like a couple months ago, and he was talking about how he brought in this highest project he's ever had before at the same time as he's taking a vacation. So win-win. So problem number one is not being in control of time. Second one is based around everything is in your head. So the problem with having everything in your head is that you're expecting people to do work for you if you start to delegate work, but everything's kind of in your head of the criteria and what you're looking for and how to do a certain thing. Ultimately, this problem leads towards frustration and the inability to effectively delegate work to others. So the business ends up becoming centralized towards you. So when a question needs to be answered, you're the person. When a client has a question, you're the person. When the certain specialized thing needs to be done, you're the person, right? And the problem with this is it's not scalable. It's not, you're not able to really ultimately uh, have the freedom of being the entrepreneur and the visionary that you wanted to be. And so the pain from that is really just an understanding that you're not able to effectively delegate. You can't really go beyond a certain point. These growth plateaus that I see going from six figures to seven figures, there's like one right around 10,000. There's one right around 30,000. There's another one around 60,000. And these are all different kind of problems that need to be removed. And so number two is based around everything is in your head. And this reminds me of working with Susan. And if you guys have not seen Susan's case study, she ultimately was about to give up on her agency. She talked to me and very candidly had said, I'm going to give you 6 months. You got to turn this agency around. I'll do whatever it takes. But if at the end of that 6 months we are not able to make it, we're not able to scale this agency, and I'm not able to see the growth of it, I'm going to shut it down. She had been in business for 20 years. She had followed like pretty much every agency guru out there. And so I took this on as a challenge. I wanted her to be one of my best case studies, which she is. And we took everything out of her head. Now, she was a creative firm agency owner. Ultimately, there was kind of like this internal battle between creativity and process, and being able to make sure you're not reinventing the wheel with every client, and being able to really just be able to have like a business that can sustain and grow without her. And so we went through a process of getting everything out of her head, out of her team's head, into a thing called a guidebook. Now if you think about a guidebook is basically like a if you're looking at like a tree, the guidebook is like the tree trunk. The part that's not changing within your business is the same for every client. It's a 75% that's the same for every client. And we got everything out of their head so that way there were no single points of failure in the business. And what this allowed Susan to do is really have a different look at what she was offering to her clients. Because everything, when it's in your head, you think that your business is basically a service that you're providing, when in actuality business is a lot more than that. And you're able to start to see the business and kind of what your core competencies as an organization are when everything's out there. She was a full service creative agency, and what this did was it took us a long time to get everything out of the head. But when we did, the team was empowered, and she was able to grow rapidly. Spoiler alert, she did not give up the business after 6 months. We actually got her set up to be acquired within 18 months of working together, which is pretty cool. So, uh, problem number one, or obstacle number one, is not being in control of time. Second one is based around everything is in your head. So, what is number three? Number three, the biggest obstacle is really based around the offer. So, when you have started to regain control of your time and when you've been able to get everything out of your head, the next problem is based around your offer. And is the offer something that is a lot of times is not scalable or profitable? And a lot of times it's actually based around how it's set up. So when you first started at your agency, most likely you were a freelancer that went by hours. That's pretty typical to kind of get things started. You do it based around hours, unless you had some agency coach in the way beginning, right? And the hourly rate, it doesn't matter how much you charge per hour, you're never incentivized to focus on results and getting results in the shortest amount of time. So, best experience for the client based around hours. So, for an example, if it normally takes 10 hours to get something done and you charge $150 per hour, so that work would be, $1,500, but you find out a new way of doing it, for an example, using chat gpt to maybe get some first drafts, for an example, then you're not really incentivized to work the 10 hours to get the 150. So when you use these process improvements, it's actually hurting your profitability by being better at what you do. And that's a problem. So that's one of the issues that I find a lot, where these hourly rates and things like that are ultimately decentivizing, so lack of incentive to actually do the thing that you're being hired to do, which is create client results. So that is kind of like the problem that's happening, the pain from it. If you have an offer that is not either scalable or profitable, ultimately you start to resent taking on new clients. There's only a certain amount of time where you start to realize, and you'll realize it in your profit margins. As you grow, if you don't have the right offer, then your profit margins minimize, or they get lower. And you know that you have the right offer if you take on more clients and your profits margins increase, right? Regardless of if you have to hire new people or whatever it is. So the pleasure that you can find from having the right offer is that you get excited about the offer. You get excited about taking on new clients. You get excited about the things that you do. Because ultimately you're able to, approach your business from a different lens. You're able to look at it from a different lens, which is pretty cool. And an example of this is actually Scott. I worked with Scott in the way beginning. He was based around an hour. A lot of his clients kind of came from Upwork, but he had a really, really good kind of like Upwork profile, and so it was hard for him to kind of like get out of that hourly model, right? And through working with him, we found really what his true value that he was giving to his clients are. And so from that, we were able to price based around the value. And by doing so, Scott was able to not only increase his profit margins, he ultimately created a package that could serve the client even better, and that he could delegate to about the majority of the work to his team, all within 3 months, and he doubled his profit margins. Now, if anybody is watching this right now and you want to check out any of these case studies that I'm bringing up throughout these obstacles, you can go to nicheandcontrol.com. At the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a bunch of testimonials, which includes Susan's and Warren's and Scott's and so forth. So, one of the biggest things about the offer is that when you understand that your main goal is to get client results, not work longer hours, there should be an understanding that there is a lot of freedom that can come from that understanding. Now, throughout this entire time, if you want to have a conversation with me about your business specifically, I'll finish the next two steps in a second. But if anything that I am talking about resonates with you, you can find 15 minutes with me where we can diagnose kind of what your bottleneck to growth is. You can go to nicheandcontrol.com/discovery and find 15 minutes for us to chat. Now let's go on to step number 4, or obstacle number 4, which is based around the pipeline is not exponentially growing. Okay. So the problem is that if you have your control of time, right? And if you have everything out of your head, then you're building this offer that is both a scalable and profitable offer. Then the step number 4 is really just based around feeding the pipeline. And I find a lot of times the problem is that agency owners are basically relying on either one or two of these kind of client attraction strategies or systems. They might be relying solely on like paid ads or referrals, right, or the network, right, or only cold email, right. And what happens is that when you don't have multiple channels that are feeding your pipeline, you're basically at the whim of whatever that channel or platform is. Now, there are many different examples of this, but what is needed is that basically you have to have multiple ways of being able to bring in appointments, and have multiple ways of being able to book appointments, generate interest. And a lot of times that means that you have to integrate your client attraction strategies into a singular hybrid integrated strategy. And the pain of having it to where you're only relying on maybe one or two of these channels is that they don't always work. Something might change. If I'm on live on a whole bunch of social medias right now. So if social media, if you're one of your channels, like you're only on Facebook, right, and then Facebook changes an algorithm, and all of a sudden your business doesn't have a lot of leads coming in. That's an example. You want to have multiple kind of things. And one of the ways that I describe this to my clients is based around a three-legged stool. So if you can think about a three-legged stool, basically it's a stool that has three legs. The strength of one leg is the strength of the whole. And if one leg breaks, then it falls, right? And ultimately, client attraction, how you're booking appointments, is a three-legged stool. It's the outbound system, the inbound system, or referral system. And this reminds me also of Susan. When we were working with Susan, we got to a point where she was able to delegate a lot of work to the team, and we had to figure out a way of making it to where feeding the pipeline was never going to be an issue for her. And so we started to analyze, and a lot of it was based around a network. And then she had some emails, and that was kind of like her main thing. And what we started to do is we started to look at different ways of showing value and being able to be different in the marketplace. If all of her competitors were doing the same thing, why would she jump into kind of like a red ocean and try to compete with that, as opposed to just creating a blue ocean in with her niche? And so what we ended up doing was creating all three of these outbound, inbound, and referral systems to basically create exponential demand for her services. And through doing so, she was able to basically double her creative agency, and at the same time starting to work less. She got married, so that was awesome. Congratulations, Susan. And at the same exact time, towards the end of it, she got to connect with a PR firm, and that basically had a shared kind of industry or niche, and they merged together, and she got acquired within 18 months. And she's going to be the person that writes the forward in my book. So super awesome. It's amazing what can happen when you actually tap into an exponential pipeline. And that ultimately is one of the obstacles that a lot of people face, and once they've built everything else up. So now that has led towards, obstacle number 5. Just as a recap, in case you're joining me right now, obstacle number 1 is not being in control of time. The second one is based around having everything in your head. Third one is based around your offer is neither, scalable or profitable. And then number 4 was based around not having an exponentially growing pipeline. So step number 5, or obstacle number 5, is really based around empowering people. So your people are not empowered right now to basically run whole parts of the company so you can focus on growth. The problem with this is that if you haven't set up the people systems, the hiring, the training, the managing, and being able to get some optics into your business, you're going to constantly be kind of like that micromanager, which is ultimately not going to be setting up your team for success. And the way to kind of go through this is understanding what the pain actually is. If you realize that as you take on new people, you have to do all the hiring, all the training, all the managing, you have to check on people numerous times, and that's a kind of an issue. You'll know it when the majority of your time is based around either management work or admin work. If you're being held back from growing your business, then ultimately it's based around the hat that you're wearing at the time. So the pleasure. So what you can actually accomplish when you start to empower your team, what you're doing is you're giving them both kind of like guidelines and systems and processes in order for them to really thrive in the role. But more importantly, you're able to kind of like take a step back and look at your business as a whole and start to look at the things that you've created, the offer. You're able to see it from a new lens, a kind of a higher perspective. And usually around this obstacle number 5, if this is kind of where you're focused on, this is where you're closer to that 7-figure level, because 7-figure agencies ultimately, in order for them to go from 7 to 8, it's all based around talent. It's a talent game where you're choosing the right people within the system to make it work. And so if you find yourself at a place where the issue is not based around feeding a pipeline or your offer or time or anything, it's really based around the people systems, then empowering your people is ultimately how you break that obstacle. And at this time, this reminds me of my client, Warren. Warren had basically, when we first started, he was at about 15,000 per month in his agency, and we started working together, and we went through the same process. We started to regain control of his time. Then we focused on getting everything out of him and his partner and his employee at the time, all of their heads into a guidebook. We went through the process of looking at the offer and kind of like the client path. And then we started to feed the pipeline based around the things that were working and kind of differentiating him in the market. And by doing so, he went from 15,000 per month to over 100,000 per month in 9 months. Became monthly recurring on the 12th month. which is pretty amazing when you can tap all into an understanding of how each piece of these obstacles. They're basic kind of like stages within your growth. And if you know what stage you're in, which is what I'm trying to convey today, is if you know which one kind of resonated with you, kind of know where to focus. And so that is really the training, the live stream. If anything that I have talked about resonates with you at all, please go to nicheandcontrol.com/discovery. I would like to offer you just an understanding of clarity, giving you some clarity. I've had discovery calls with some agency owners that feel stuck and burnt out, and they don't really know exactly what they need to do, because scaling can be kind of challenging or complex. And a lot of times, the complexity is actually the thing that holds people back from moving forward. They're like overwhelmed by it. And ultimately, if I could give you that kind of clarity within a 15-minute conversation, then that would be worth it. Whether or not you decide to work with me or not doesn't matter. Now, what does matter is, and what I'm passionate about, is being able to really serve more people and be able to serve you really powerfully if anything that I've talked about resonates with you. So you can go to nicheandcontrol.com/discovery. And I thank you very much for being on the live. I'm just going to see if I have to check anything, anybody's responded to anything or anything like that. So cool. Well, thank you very much, guys.